Siobhan. How are you?
I'm good, Nicola. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. It's lovely to see you.
And likewise, nice to see your face again.
In such tough times, sure. So I wanted to ask you, Siobhan, just to start off, because others on the line won't know who you are and where you currently live, if you can just introduce yourself first, please.
Sure. So my name is Siobhan. I am currently living in London, in a suburb called Whitechapel, which is East London. And I've been living here since November 2015. Prior to moving to London, I actually worked with you at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange for many, many years, and left South Africa, or rather left the JSE to sort of explore international opportunities, got the chance to come to London, and have been here ever since. So yeah, experiencing life in lockdown in the city of London.
Awesome. So people that don't know you would probably be very curious about your accent, though, because it's not very South African.
Not everyone knows the South African accent. So the accent is a mix-up, an amalgam of, I guess, the byproduct of having been born in Iran, growing up in the United States, moving to South Africa for high school, and then spending quite a bit of time overseas since then. So yeah, it's like a mutt, really, just a hybrid.
I think it's a beautiful Siobhan accent.
Thank you, Nicola.
Makes you very unique.
Friends.
So I just wanted to ask you to share a bit with me about what lockdown is like in the UK and in London, and specifically where you're living, how long you've been in lockdown for, what the sort of rules have been, and how are you coping with it personally?
Yeah, thanks. So you did, in fact, indicate to me beforehand some of the topics you wanted to cover in our discussion today. So I saw one of the questions you had was, when did lockdown start? And I have to be honest, I actually had to look it up because I couldn't remember. I don't know if you have the same feeling. I sort of feel like time is, on the one hand, compressed, and on the other hand, completely extended. Like this.
Yeah.
Days kind of bleed into one another, weekdays bleed into weekends, the separation between day and night, work day and night is not very clear. So that said, fortunately, we have the internet, so I was able to look it up, and we went into lockdown formally on the 23rd of March. So we are now coming up to our 6th week of lockdown. We have, by all indications, at least another week to go. So there's nothing to suggest we'll hear earlier, but in theory, the government's supposed to report back to us at the end of next week as to what happens next.
Yeah.
And we don't know what that means. Lockdown for us has been, so essentially we're required to stay at home like everyone else in lockdown. We are obviously allowed to go out for grocery shopping, which is good, because if you had tried to do, you're able to do online shopping, but if you had tried to do it, at least initially, I mean, the sort of available slots were kind of 6 weeks out, 2 months out. So,
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so you pretty much, if you were able to go grocery shopping, you pretty much had to. And then we're allowed to take kind of half an hour's exercise every day. They're not overly prescriptive. They were kind of not that prescriptive in the beginning about what form that took. And then I think increasingly, as they sort of saw behavior that they thought wasn't appropriate, they sort of started putting more guidance or rules in place. So I would say we have a kind of semi-strict lockdown. It's not enforced by the military. It is semi-enforced by the police, but not necessarily in the same way that it is in other parts of the world.
Okay.
So, yeah, I would say the main sort of frustration with the lockdown here, at least for me, is that the communication from the government's really poor. It's not, firstly, there's no sort of sense of, we've had to adjust course, we've now learned new things, we're doing things differently now, something we thought previously is perhaps now not that relevant, and so no sort of sense of maybe we've made mistakes and we're adjusting. Yeah. Everything is always going exactly the way it was supposed to be going. which we just know isn't true. And then also there's sort of a refusal to communicate any sort of sense of how we might come out of this or what that might look like. So I think we're definitely starting to see, people starting to flout the lockdown rules more and more. I think because people are just getting sort of somewhat frustrated at not having any sense of what the next steps are.
Yeah, that must be so frustrating, because I think communications here in South Africa have actually been pretty good.
Yeah, I have to say, when I compare the sort of communication I see coming out of South Africa with what we see here, it's you guys definitely seem to be doing better on that front than we are. And I can give you 9,000 reasons for why I think the British government is not performing that well on that front, but I'll spare you the diatribe my husband has to listen to when I listen to the news in the morning.
Is it linked to your Prime Minister having been in denial and then contracted the virus himself?
Yes, and he's just had his baby was born today. So, so much happening.
Wow, amazing. So Siobhan, just on another note, you've mentioned that you have now started having to do some board meetings from home. I mean, or how has this affected you? I mean, have you had to change your way of work, or are you pretty comfortable working remotely?
So interesting, because I sit on a board of a company actually in South Africa, but I am also at the moment still for the next 2 days a full-time student. So actually, to a certain extent, a lot of I was kind of working from home quite a lot in any event, though I obviously didn't spend all my time at home. Even when I was a student, I would either go to class, or I would go work in the library, or I would go find a coffee shop to work in, or so in some senses, working from home is more, I guess, regular for me than for other people. But I still miss the being able to go out. The board meetings obviously are completely different to what we've had before. And so far, I think it's working okay. Obviously in a board setting, your big concern is, are you getting the correct levels of governance and oversight, which is what the board is supposed to be exercising. Yeah. And it's more challenging in a remote setting. It's harder to interject into a conversation. Having a free flow conversation is more challenging. But that said, fortunately, I think the nature of our board is such that we get a lot of communication on an ongoing basis from the executive in any event. And so the board meetings have been more of a kind of dealing either with specific issues or getting updates on particularly COVID-19 related developments rather than formal board type meetings. So we'll have to see once we move into the formal meetings. And then I start a new job on Friday.
Wow.
With a company, it's an NGO actually, with a company based in Amsterdam, where I've only met some of the people in person. And so I'm kind of trying to get my head around, how do you start a new job with a whole new bunch of people when you haven't met them in person and you're not going to for the foreseeable future? So
I know. Wow. That's so hard. Sure.
Yeah.
Actually, one of my best friends just started working for a new company in lockdown. And she's sitting there and she's thinking, because they don't even use video calls, she's sitting there and she's saying, do you guys realize I'm trying to figure out what you all look like? And when I meet you, I might have a completely different reality. So sure. I mean, that must be so challenging. Good luck with that. I hope you'll encourage them to do video calls so you can at least see them.
Yeah, no, they do. I mean, they use MS Teams and stuff like that, and Skype and that. So yeah, so they're already versed in that. But it is, so much of our work relationships are about managing social dynamics. Yeah. And it's hard to manage social dynamics if you haven't had a chance to go grab cups of coffee with people. And
exactly,
I'm sure we'll learn to do things differently. But I've grown up in a world where that was the way you did things. So anyway,
that's true. I think there's maybe pros and cons to it. Maybe it's getting rid of a bit of the politics and maybe we're a bit more results focused, but that human element is missing. I agree with you. I can't wait to just have a cup of coffee with someone and just see each other. We are social creatures.
Well, and I was speaking to a mutual friend of ours, Bernadette, the other day, because she started working for a Swiss company, also having to do a lot of it remotely at the moment. And I was saying to her, so often if you got stuck, trying to get something done within an organization, you were waiting to get something done, you just run down 2 flights of stairs and kind of stand in the doorway of their office or at their desk until they promise to do what you needed to do just to get rid of you. And now it's kind of easier for them to ignore you and not get back to you on stuff. Anyway, I was kind of joking,
true.
But you get
That's
my
true.
point.
So one last question. If you could give a positive message in terms of how do you keep your spirits up, and just generally what you would recommend others do during these unprecedented, completely new history in the making times?
Yeah, so 2 things. I have cut back my digestion of social media, Twitter, dramatically. I think initially I was kind of checking it obsessively because I somehow thought if I had all the information, I'd be able to control it. And it's not true.
Yeah.
And constantly checking that information, death rates, responses, was just making me anxious. So I had to learn to let some of that go. I've actually, to be honest, also started just doing 10 minutes of meditation every day, just kind of more mindfulness, breathing stuff. And then I sort of try to focus on some of the stuff you see circulating, where we talk about the opportunity, the sort of catchphrase of build back better, right? The one thing that's really revealed is the sort of inequities and precarities of so many existences. And, you and I are relatively privileged in our ability to experience lockdown in the way that we do. And so the one thing that we'll get through this. Humans are innovative and we're resilient, and it will be fine. We'll come through the other end. I just hope that, one of the things those of us who are in positions to do so should focus on is making sure that the world we go into when we come out of this is maybe a better one for everyone rather than just for some of us.
Couldn't agree with that more. You're giving me goosebumps. I mean, I think things like the Solidarity Fund and people donating 1/3 of their salary, I think that's just amazing work. And certainly I've personally done that as well, because I just think if we don't all recognize that we are privileged, and I mean, social distancing is a luxury item, especially in South Africa. Informal settlements, it's not possible. So seeing where we can help, I love that. Thank you. Thanks so much, Siobhan.
My pleasure. Nice to chat, Nicola.
It's been awesome to talk. Thank you. Take care.
Bye.